I'm Katrina, and this is Sew and Tare. This is part 2 of the canning intro to canning. If you have not watched part 1, I'm going to put a link up here in the corner. Welcome back to the kitchen. We have all of our supplies out. We have our pressure canner with the lid and racks. There's a rack in there already. Here's a second rack, and we have our jiggler. So this is the pressure weight. We also have this little magnet guy to get the lids out of the hot water, and we have our jar lifter, so we lift our jars like that safely. We have a cloth to put our jars on so that it's in between the counter, which is cold, and the jars will be hot when they come out, so that is important that you have that. And we have our jars. So we have some water here. I'm going to get it started. So first thing we want to do is check our lid, make sure our vent is clear. So to do that, you just lift it up, look through, and I can see light through it. That means we're good. So this is good, and I'm going to set this aside. Now if you have an All-American canner, it does come with this rubber band. That's so you don't hear this all the time. So save this. I keep this little thing, and this is where the rubber band and the jiggler, where I keep them, just because they're small parts and I want to make sure that I don't lose them. So I have this. Put it right here. All right. So your jars. I usually can with a reusable lid. Harvest Guard makes these. Tare also makes them. So it is a food grade, like plastic, and then it has this gasket, and that is the lid. This will last forever, and the gasket gets replaced after many, many uses. I haven't replaced any yet. So a lot of my videos, you're going to see this on it. I will do another video showing what the differences are between the metal lids and these lids, but for today, because this is the intro course, I am going to be just using what's in this package. So I'm going to be using the metal. All right. So jars. We want them to be mason jars. If it says mason jars, it's for canning. That's what you want. These jars are made for pressure. They're made for wet pressure. So it's not going to be any jar that you've collected. Some people save those and use those for like emergency use. I use them for dry goods. So like I would use them for, storing spices or seasonings or herbs that have been dried. That's fine. But for actually canning, you want a mason jar, a jar made for canning. So the three brands that I use are Kerr, which is what this is, Ball, and they are owned by the same company, and Purr, which I don't know who owns that. But those are the three brands I use. There's also been some controversy over lids. There's a lot of metal lids out there that are not all that great. They don't seal well. But those three brands seal well. Lisa from Sutton's Days says that she loves the 4 jars lids. I believe her, so I would make that recommendation based on what I've heard from her channel. So some of the other lids, they're made elsewhere, and they might not have as good a lid. So, up to you what you use. But if you're a first-time canner, I would get new jars. You can get jars at thrift stores or garage sales. If you get them at thrift stores, sometimes thrift stores cost more than in the store. So be aware of that per jar. But yeah, so this should have the jar, the band. You're going to want to keep these. And the lid. So the lid has this little gummy layer, and I believe that they're saying you don't have to warm these up anymore, but I always do, so it doesn't have any harm with warming them up. Especially with pressure canning, you wouldn't have to, but I always do. So I always have, I always do, so I'm going to. There's no harm in doing that. So, all right, so you want to get your jars ready, and what that means is to wash them. And at this point, you don't need to sanitize them. We are doing pressure canning. It'll get sanitized in the process. So there's no need for that. You just want to make sure that you don't have any like factory dust kind of stuff. When you're doing this, you also want to check the rims for chips. So you just run your hand along it and check for chips. And they usually don't have them coming out of the store, but sometimes, especially if you get these shipped, sometimes there's broken jars. So you just want to be cognizant of that. So, or you might drop one. Don't do that. Depending on the size of your canner, you may be able to fit more or less jars in it. This one double stacks, and I believe it double stacks. I'm going to test it, but I believe it double stacks, I want to say 18, but that's with the small, the regular mouth. So if you have an All-American and you have wide mouth, you're going to be fitting one less jar, and it's just because wide mouth jars are shorter and wider, and regular mouth jars are narrower and taller. So that's just something to think about when getting your jars ready. And I have more jars. I usually reuse jars. I'm just using this new because I have them in the garage, and I want to show you guys what it looks like when you get them out of the box. So let's get started. For this one, everything is going to get sanitized in the pressure canner, so I'm not concerned about that. Usually for like water bath canning, you would boil these for 10 minutes and that would sanitize them. You would also boil the jars for 10 minutes and that would sanitize them. But we're not concerned about that, so we're just going to wash them and fill them and make sure that these lids are warm. And there you go. So, oh, what are we canning? We are canning quail. Yeah, so we harvested quail and they've been in the ice water bath, and I'll put links up here. I'll put a couple of them so you can see what we do with the ice water bath, and then if you were to go from that to freezing, what you would do. The only difference here is we're not going to pat them dry, so because there's no need to do that. All right, let's get started. If you do not have hard water, you do not need to do this step. This is something that I have found I need to do. Is just add a little bit of vinegar, white vinegar, to the water here. That gets rid of the calcium in the water. It dissolves it so that it doesn't become an issue with the seal. All right, we're back. I forgot one key thing is some scissors, and I believe I found the biggest and smallest quail that we had. Now we processed some jumbos and we processed some standards, and they can be quite different. I'll bring you in here and you can see the difference. I also processed some really older birds and some moderately old birds. So none of these is what you find at the 8 weeks old, which is what we usually process at. But birds of any age do great canning. Now I haven't done a taste test between the 8-week-olds and the later ones, but I did save back a jar of 11-month-olds and a jar of 8-week-olds, and we're going to do a comparison side by side at some point. So wait for that video, but here's the spoiler is they're both good. I don't know that I could tell the difference, but I'm going to see side by side if I can. So here we go. All right, so I believe this is probably the smallest. You can see there's lots of fat. This is one of the older ones. You can see I didn't get quite all the feathers. So this is the older one. The older ones have fat. If you saw the video I did a short on this, and the fat, once you soak it in the ice water, it does lighten up. So this is a little less yellow than what you guys saw. But I believe this is probably the smallest one. And I think this is the biggest one in the group. I did rinse these, but they still have feathers on them. Alright, so this I believe is the biggest in the group. And you can see that's a considerable difference. Now you did note that some of these is black around their opening, and that is normal. So especially the females have some ink that come out, so it just gets dyed. If it bothers you, cut it off. It doesn't bother me, so I'm going to keep it. So anyway, let's compare these guys and see what they are. So the little one is 38 grams. And it looks like I left some water on there. Let's try it again. Alright, little one. Yeah, 38 grams. I will re-tear. The big one is 71 grams. So that's 38 and 71. That is quite a difference. And you can tell that quite well. So anyway, just thought you guys would like to see that. Alright, so we are going to our computers for the National Center for Home Food Preservation again. We're going to select how to can and scroll down, and then under poultry it says chicken or rabbit. Now I know rabbit is not poultry unless you're talking about Easter bunny, because obviously Easter bunny lays eggs. Rabbit and poultry. So this will work for any rabbit or bird basically that you want to can. And I'm going to be doing the bone in. So for bone in, hot and raw pack, I'm doing pints. This is a pint. You can also do quarts. You cannot do this in half gallons, so pints or quarts. So it's pints, and it's 65 minutes at 10 pounds of pressure under 1,000 feet, which is what I am. And above 10,000 feet, it would be 15. So again, I have a weight gauge pressure canner, so that's what I follow. If you have a dial gauge, you'd follow the other table. So we are doing that. And as you see here, we have, for raw pack, it is fill jars loosely with raw meat pieces, leaving 1 1/4 inch headspace, and do not add liquid. So in general, I prefer hot pack over raw pack. However, with quail, they are so small, and I don't want to debone them. So if somebody else wants to debone them, go ahead and do that. I don't feel like it. I feel like I have a pretty good method. I'll show you guys later, probably in another video, how best to get the bones out, because sometimes you do get, you know, a leg bone or a rib in your meal. So I'm going to start filling these, and I'll bring you in close so you can see what I'm doing. And if you have another way that you pack these, go ahead and put it in the comments. I know some people cut the breasts apart and it gets more room. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try something else this time, and you'll see what that is. We'll go from here. Alright, so my secret to doing this is I cut off the legs. So when you are dealing with quail, you can tell these legs are super floppy. There is not much connecting them. So if you, this is the bottom of the quail, if you just hold your fingers like that, you shouldn't be cutting through much to get that out. And so that's what I do. Now, because I have experience getting the meat off of these bones, I keep the extra flap with the leg, just because it makes my life easier later on. So that's what I'm going to be doing, is separating these. And you know, if you want to save those separately in the refrigerator for you know, like a chicken wing type thing, then that would be fine. If you want to can them separately from the breast, that's fine. What I'm going to do is put the legs in here, and that will fill that cavity, and I think that'll be fine. So I just put its legs inside it itself, and then put it in the jar. So if you're really creative about it, you can pack more in. And depending on the size of your quail, you can pack more or less. So like this is a big one. I'm going to put it with a little one, just because that will be most efficient. And I would say for later on, try not to cut through any ribs. Because you will find them in your mouth later if you do that. So I'm cutting below the last rib, over to the body, and down. And you don't have to cut it all. You can shove the whole thing in. It's just it's going to be more efficient space-wise, and you're going to get more meat in if you do it this way. Let's see if these fit. I might have to take the legs out. Actually, no. I might have to take the legs out. We're going to give that its own thing. Probably stack some legs on top of it. I think I'm just gonna put one leg in that. The other one on top, and I think that gets us to our 1/4 inch. Alright, this one has a little bit lighter skin. I'll try and show this up close. So I don't know if you guys can see it, but right here is the last rib. Okay, right there. So what I'm doing is I'm cutting above the hip, and then along the bottom part of that last rib, all the way to here. I'll show you again on this side. So there's the last rib. Just cut right around. There you go. Yeah, I think putting one leg inside fills the space okay. And this big one's going to get a couple extra legs in it. I think next time I do this, I mean, pints tend to be a pretty good size for most families, I think. I think next time I do this, though, I'm going to try quarts. I've never done quarts before, but it should be good. Because we'll use it in a few days. Some of these big ones are pretty big. I have to separate these out. So because all these birds are different sizes, I'm just having to finagle it until they fit, which is fine. Yeah, some of these have some wonderful, wonderful fat on there. Alright, these are ready for the lids. I'm going to just use a cloth with a little bit of white vinegar. That will clean the surfaces of the jar for any fats and oils so that it will give a good seal. Now notice we're not adding any liquid to this. This jar will have plenty of liquid from the meat itself when it's processed. Alright, this little doodah has a magnet on the bottom. It's really easy, so you just pick it up like this, bring it over, put it down, and pop it off. Let's do it again. You want to make sure you only have one lid. Sometimes two lids come up with it. And there you go. So like here's an example where there's two lids. We only want one. So there we go. Alright, we are ready for rings. I realize I'm really crooked. Sorry about that, guys. We're ready for rings. Now, with the metal lids, I don't need to touch anything in the middle. I just need to put it on until it's finger-tight tip. Finger-tip tight. So, sometimes you have to back it off a little bit to get it threaded, started right. These shouldn't be bent right out of the factory, but look at that. It's bent, so we're not using that one. Luckily I have more, and that one you can use for arts and crafts, or you can recycle it. So again, we're not cranking on it, we're just going finger tight, and it doesn't need to be any more than that. If you would like to, you can label them now. If not, you can label them later. I always label them after. I think the only reason to label them now would be if you have different things in there that you can't tell what it is. So like you can can different things at the same time, as long as you do it for the time, like the longer time of the two. So I mean, but if you're doing chicken and quail or rabbit and quail, you can do it at the same time without any difference. It should be fine. It will be fine. I think I got a little squished over here. All right, these are good. We're ready to put it in. So I have an All-American canner, and on this canner, every canner, you're going to have a water line that you need. Some of them have it marked on the inside. Some of it says how many quarts. I know where it is on mine. It's right here. Just because I've done it so many times, it's created a line. So basically, you need water in here for the steam to happen. How these work is it fills full of steam, it evacuates all the air, and it's all steam in there. And at that point, it's steam pressure. So that is what you're doing when you're canning, is you're actually using the pressure of steam. So you do not want this to go dry during your canning process. I think it said 65 minutes. We're gonna double check. We always double check, always, every time you can. And that's a long time for something to be, you know, boiling at pressure. So you wanna make sure that you do have enough moisture in there for the steam to retain, for it to not run dry, basically. If you run it dry, you're going to ruin your canner and probably your food. So I'm going to fill this up, not fill it up, but I'm going to fill it up to that line, and I'll show you a trick here. You do not need to carry around your canner when it's full of water at all. You guys like my giant ladle? Now I do have a rack in the bottom, and we talked about this before, but racks are important so that it protects your jars so they don't break. And a little bit more, and we're at my line. Now, next up, we need to oil. So this is only instructions for All American canners. All American canners do not have a gasket. It is metal on metal, so it does need a little something to lubricate it. People use Vaseline, which I don't really want to use on my food stuff. An olive oil is also recommended. I don't have olive oil right now, so I'm going to use avocado oil. I don't know if that's a good idea or not, but it's an oil, and it will serve the purpose that we need it to serve. And all I'm going to do is I usually use my finger. I thought this had like one of those stoppers in it. It doesn't. Alright, it doesn't need to be thick. You know, I just have some on my hand, and it just needs to go around this. It should not be thick, in fact. Around here. And you're going to remember to wash this once you're done canning, and part of that is so that you get this off. Alright, let's see how many we fit in the canner. So this is the bottom row. This is going to be the bottom row. Yeah, it looks like it's 8 for the bottom row. We're going to put this on. And we want that to cover, ooh, it might be 7. Alright guys, we're going with 7. I might be able to fiddle with this a while more and get it to fit, but I know I'm doing more batches than this, so that's fine. So basically I want this edge to go over these other jars so that it's level. So that's the point there. And then when I put it on, I'm going to try not to put it right over a jar I had. I'm going to try and go in between. I don't know that it really matters, but that's what I do. Now this upper layer can fit 8. Because you don't have a limitation, you can go a little bit wider. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I need 3 more jars. Alright, we have 15 jars in here, and next step is to close it up. Now on the All American, there's this little notch here that lines up with this arrow. Okay. We also have these little tabs here. They hook underneath this metal piece. Okay. Bring you guys down. Next, you'll notice there's a gap here. So you want to make sure it's not all the way one way or the other way, and it's all the same along the whole entire thing. Now right here you can say this is way bigger over here gap than this. This is smaller. So I just put it down a little bit, and I look for multiple angles, okay? And I'm looking from the side over here. That looks pretty good, still a little high. And we're good. All right, we're gonna turn this on. I'm gonna put it close to high, not on high, to get it started. When you're doing something cold, like a raw pack or a cold pack, you want room temperature water. And when you're doing something a hot pack, then you want hot water. So that's something to keep in mind. So now that we have the lid on, we want to clamp it down. So on the All-American, we have these that we just put up. You might have to unscrew them more to put them all the way up. And we do this opposite, like a car tire, okay? So opposite, opposite. And if you don't know about car tires, you're supposed to tighten the lugs opposite, not one by one around in a circle. Once I do this, I check it again. I check this line again, and it looks good. And I tighten down, and now it's a waiting game. Now that this is set, it's ready to go. The heat is on. We're good to go. We're gonna be in the kitchen. At this point, you can probably walk away for 20 minutes, come back. I don't recommend that. I recommend that every time you have anything pressure canning related or canning related, that you stay at least in the vicinity. But what we're gonna wait for is there's gonna be steam coming out of this, of the vent that we've already checked to make sure it is clear so the steam can get through. So there's gonna be steam coming, through the vent, and when that becomes a steady stream of steam, we're gonna start 10 minutes. And I'll show you what that looks like when we get there. And then we'll let that evacuate for 10 more minutes. Once it's a steady, and what that will ensure is it will ensure there's no more air left in the canner, and it's all steam. So once that happens, we can then put on our weight. So that is what we're waiting for. We're not looking at the pressure yet. There's nothing pressure related yet. We're waiting for steam. So you saw how much water is in there. You know how long water usually takes to boil. It's going to take a while. So let's see. It's 9:04 right now. We'll see what happens when it's boiling. So always have something to do in the kitchen, around the kitchen, something like that. Bring your hand weights in your kitchen. That's what I'm going to do, is do my weight exercises in the kitchen. And yeah, you can also start to prepare the next batch, but realize this is going to take a long time. So you might be doing that next batch tomorrow. If you have room in the refrigerator, go ahead and prepare it and keep it in the jars. You know, don't put the lids on yet. You know, you can cover it, but put it in the refrigerator, and you can pull that out the next day and can it the next day. That's fine. Or if you've hit midnight, right? It's 9. We're going to be up to midnight with this canning project. So if you've hit midnight, you're tired, and you really don't want to spend hours canning, it's okay to put stuff in the refrigerator and do it the next day. I have done many a canning project that do not get done in one day. Part of that is, you know, I work full time, so I have nighttime to do all this stuff. So do it as your schedule allows, and take it from there. Now, if you do refrigerate your jars and everything, you do need to make sure that your water is cold, or that you're not putting it into hot water. All right, let's wait. We'll see you soon. Alright guys, it is 9:34 and you can see that the steam is going. You should be able to see it right here. I see it against the cabinet. But it's not quite steady yet. You can kind of see how it's coming and going. But it's really, really close to being steady. So keep an eye on it, and it'll probably take a couple minutes once it's hit this point, and it will start to be more steady. And then once it's steady, I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so here's our steady stream of steam, and we're not doing anything up here. All we're doing is we're setting this timer for 10 minutes. And this will evacuate all of the air, make sure it's all out of the canner. But that's what you're looking for. It's really hard to see against certain surfaces. So like, it's really kind of hard to see there. It's easier to see in person, but I always like to look against the cabinet. Our 10 minutes are up. I have my weight gauge. This is 10 pounds of pressure for my elevation. And I'm just going to put that on here. And now we get to wait for that first jiggle. So we're gonna hear it and it'll jiggle. So from this point on, you are not leaving the kitchen. We need to make sure that this doesn't get over pressure. It shouldn't, because there's a jiggler and there's an emergency release in case it does get too high. But you never know what's going to happen. And then also, if it goes below pressure and you're not getting that jiggler to move as it should, then the process has to start over again. So that's not a very good thing either. So what we're going to do is, if you have a jiggler, this is an example I'm using because this is the pressure canner I have. You may have a dial gauge. It's at this point that you want to wait for the pressure to go up to 10 or 15 if you are at a higher elevation. So this dial gauge for my piece of equipment is not something that I rely on, because as soon as you put the jiggler on, that is more accurate than any dial gauge out there. That weight is not going to change. It's going to be the same, and as long as you put it on there, 10 pounds per pressure for 0 to 1,000 feet and 15 pounds of pressure above 1,000 feet, then it's good. That's already calculated into all the math. So that's good. And so I'm not paying attention to the dial at this point. It is going up. It will go up, and it will be about right at this point. If you are relying on a dial pressure gauge, then you need to get that calibrated every year. So that's the reason why I went with All American, is because it has the jiggler. It's all American, and it's very robust. Now Presto is one of the other, All American and Presto are the main ones that are out there that do pressure canners. I think there's some other brands, but those are the two that are like big, and they have weight. They have weight gauge as well, or they have the jiggler as well for theirs, and it's different. And I just don't have any experience with it, but you can do that. But if you are only relying on the dial, then it does need to be calibrated. So think about, how many times your phone gets off, or your computer needs updates, or something gets off, or your thermometers need to be calibrated all the time, right? I mean, think about meat thermometers. They have that nut on the bottom that you have to adjust. So that's just a safety issue to think about, and so we're just going to rely on the jiggler for this. And if you follow your own manufacturer's booklet for it, if you don't have the manufacturer's booklet anymore, pretty much all of them are on online. So also for your jiggler, follow your manufacturer's directions for how many jiggles per minute or how many, rattles per minute or whatever, and then that will be a good experience. All right, we're at 5 pounds of pressure. We're going to wait till we go to 10, then we're starting our time. So it's about to do its first jiggle. You can kind of see it sputtering. And you can see this is reading like 11.5 pounds, which means it's a little bit off. There's our first jiggle. We're going to start our time, 65 minutes, which is 1 hour and 5 minutes. And we are also going to start, we're also going to be starting to gradually lower the heat. We don't want to lower it too much at once. But it'll take a little bit to get to the right point, and we'll get to the point that the rattle is 1 to 4 rattles per minute is ideal for the all-American canners. If you're doing something, if you have a different canner, just read their manufacturer instructions. So you'll just have to dial it in as you're in the kitchen. So there's a rattle and it stopped. That's a good rattle. It may rattle for a little bit longer than that, and all that's doing is it's releasing the extra pressure. What that means is inside, this is holding at 10 pounds of pressure, and what's happening when it's rattling is it's releasing extra pressure to stay at 10 pounds. So it's going above 10 pounds and releasing that extra, and then coming back, that'll bring it back down to the 10 pounds. So we're looking for a rattle like that 1 to 4 times a minute, and for this canner. All right, you're not leaving the kitchen. We'll see you in 65 minutes. So the timer just went off, and we are doing nothing up here. All we're doing is we're turning off the heat. That's it. Okay? That will start to bring down the pressure. You'll see the dial start to go down. It'll go to 0. Then, and only then, once it's at 0, do we take this off with a hot pad. So you have at least half an hour here. Go do something, take the garbage out, go do an exercise, something like that. You're free from the kitchen for about half an hour. So we'll actually time it. It's 11:03 right now. So we started at 10:0 something. So we're 2 hours in, and we have to let the pressure come down, and then we can get the jars out. So it is time consuming, but this is how things work. So we'll see you once it's come down. All right, so this is now at 0. And so what we want to do is, with a hot pad, because it is very hot, with a hot pad, take the jiggler off and wait 2 minutes. So the reason for waiting 2 minutes is so that the pressure doesn't release too quickly, and it gives a chance to further reduce the pressure inside. Any extra pressure, any temperature difference is going to start now. So that's important because your jars it can affect the sealing of your jars. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait 2 minutes, and then after 2 minutes is done, we need to take off the lid. Now, if you wait too long to do this, a vacuum can seal everything shut, and your canner will be very hard to open. So it's important to get it, 2 minutes. I'm sure if it goes a few minutes longer, that's not a problem, but I've never had it happen. I just know that in the instructions it says that. So something to keep in mind. All right, guys, you made it through this far. We're ready to take a lid off. Now again, we're doing opposite, just like a car tire. Now I like to give it a little bit of time. Always open this away from yourself. And I like to give it a little bit of time for a little bit of that steam to escape so that the pressure in the jars the temperature and stuff doesn't change too quickly. This is especially important if your kitchen is cold. Usually not really all that necessary, but I like to do that. So this we can set somewhere, and pick these up, and you can see just how boiling that is still. Very, very hot. And so I'm going to put this on the table. So if you guys remember, we did not put any liquid in these jars. And look how much liquid is in there. Pretty impressive. Alright, you can use this little doodah or a chopstick or anything to lift this up to get to the bottom layer. The water looks nice and clean. Doesn't look like it. Did you guys hear that pop? That this jar just sealed. Doesn't look like it siphoned or anything, which is good. That has a nice fat layer at the top. That must have had some extra fat. Look how yellow that is. Alright, you guys heard some pings. I know this is poor lighting over here. This is what I have to work with though. So I have a towel to protect the table, but also to provide a barrier between the hot and the cold. That's important. And then we're going to leave these like this, don't touch them, for 12 to 24 hours. So within that time they will seal. You've heard some pops already. That means they're sealing, but as they cool, they seal. And it'll be good. We'll show you guys tomorrow what these guys look like. Alright guys, we are back. It's the next day. We have all of these wonderful jars done. And if you are using one of these metal lids, the seal, it'll be a little bit concave in the middle. And if you touch it and it pops back up, then that's not sealed. So if you happen to have a jar that does not seal, you can put that in the refrigerator, you can freeze it, you can eat it, do one of those things within 24 hours, and you'll be able to eat that as a cooked food. You can reprocess it too, but just make sure that you know if you do reprocess it, it will lose some nutrition. So something to think about. So that's one thing. Another thing is to look, and this kind of yellowish layer on top is fat, which is good. That's flavor, it's good. And all of this liquid in here came from the quail, came from the meat. So I think that's great. You can use that as a gravy later. You can, cook rice or quinoa or, something that you cook with water. Just use this instead, and it'll be wonderful. Now I'm going to show you guys at some point, I haven't actually filmed it yet, but I want to show you guys how to watch out for the bones in here, because quail do have small bones, and it is something you do need to consider when using canned meat that has small bones. So, but it's great. It's already cooked, it's good, and you just take it out. I take it out, take it off the bone, and heat it up with something, and that's how I eat it. So, yeah, it's great. Alright, next, you have these, you believe they're sealed. We're going to take off the ring, the band, okay? You do not want to leave these on. If you leave these on, it could present a false seal, And what that means is that bad bacteria could be getting into your jar without you knowing it, and it will act like it's sealed when it is on the shelf. So you don't want to use this. This is a tool. This is not a part of the jar. And so you're done with that at this point. So what you want to do now is go through, and all of these you should be able to hold from the lid only. So again, that's from the lid. I'm not holding the jar. This is from the lid. So if you can do this with your jar, you know it's sealed. And as long as you processed it correctly according to the right, the right pressure for the right elevation and the right time for what you're canning, then it's good. So you're gonna do that test on all of them, and then these get stored. It's best to store in dark places that are cool. I don't really have much of that at my house, so I don't have the perfect scenario, but if you store it in dark places which are cooler, your food is going to last longer. Now, this will last basically forever as long as the seal is good. I know Ball says 18 months. That's what they kind of say their seal is going to work for, but they can last for years and years. Now, the idea is to eat through your pantry and rotate it, so you should not be holding on to jars for years and years and years. But if you have an excess, in 1 year, and you don't have stuff for a couple years, you can still, it's still good. Now, also what happens after 18 months is the food will start to degrade nutritionally, and that's just a natural progression of food. When you store it, it does degrade some at some point. Yeah, so canning meat, super easy, super easy. Follow the directions, double check, triple check, and make sure things are sealed, and it'll be all good. So there you go. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I will be making other canning videos. I have already made other canning videos, so go ahead and watch those. I think they're in the food preservation playlist, and so watch those, and you will learn how to preserve your food, and this is good on the shelf. There you go. Thank you for watching. Please like if you like the video, and subscribe if you aren't already subscribed. Send this to someone who wants to learn how to can. Send this to someone who doesn't understand what canning is. Send this to someone who maybe has a humongous amount of stuff in the freezer that they can and have more room in the freezer to put more stuff in the freezer. So, alright, thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day.